What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more punk rock, and we're going back to Bad Religion's 8085 compilation. This came out in 91. Now, Bad Religion, they weren't the very first punk band I discovered, but they were very early on, shortly after Propagandhi and Subhumans, and when I discovered them, the first albums I heard were Suffer, No Control Against the Grain. Incidentally, I've mentioned a number of times, I think those three albums are basically flawless. They span the period from 88 to 91. And yeah, that sound just blew my mind. I absolutely love it. Now, a couple years later, maybe like 96, 97, I got this compilation, and I was blown away because I hadn't heard their first studio album, which is, the first, I think, like 13 or 14 tunes on this, and then there's some tunes they did on some EPs and so on. But yeah, I hadn't heard their opening album, and I was like, not only enthusiastic, but surprised, because by the time you get to the Suffer, No Control Against the Grain, Generator, and so on, they had this very like polished, still aggressive, still like gritty and rugged, still like with some force, some punk rock energy, but they had a very like melodic hardcore sound that they had sort of like really crafted, obviously, once they like reformed. When you hear the stuff on their first album, and indeed on this compilation overall, it has a raw, like more gritty early 80s kind of loud and rough sort of feel. So I very much enjoyed when I discovered this, because it was like, oh man, this is like early Subhumans or like Bad Brains in the early 80s, except Bad Religion's version of that. It's like their version of that early 80s hardcore sound. So I very much love the sound of this album. Now we're going to listen to a tune called Eat Your Dog, which, despite that sort of macabre and violent and unpleasant imagery, as far as I can tell and as far as I remember, I think it's a song about the American born-again evangelical community, which in the early 80s was not only sort of becoming more prominent as like a cultural movement, but also as sort of like a social and political movement in terms of them impressing their influence on social and cultural matters. As fans of the Dead Kennedys will know, it was people in sort of that mindset and that cultural, religious sort of background who, started the PMRC and were trying to like, put limits on what kind of music could be heard and, what kind of lyrics could be released in public music stores without them putting like warning stickers on it and so on. So I think this song is more about the ideology behind the born-again evangelical movement, less about what they were doing in society. And it's the band's name is Bad Religion. This is very early on. They were basically teenagers or thereabouts, early 20s at this point. So there's an irreverence to the song. I don't know who wrote it. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Mr. Brett wrote it. Sometimes his songs can have a bit more of an acid pen, and this song does have a couple of irreverent lines. Now, to be clear, everyone's welcome on this channel, but when you talk about a band named Bad Religion, you do have to talk about their lyrics. Yeah, and there's a line where he's basically saying, this sort of born-again evangelical thing, it's like a Hindu religion in the mind of an American working Joe, but at the end of the day, he won't save you and he won't save me because you see what you want to see. You look at footsteps in the sand and, you see divine presence, whereas, in Brett's mind, he's saying, like, at the end of the day, your religion, it's not going to save you. You're dying, and at the end of the day, like, I don't see it being this rebirth that you've come to see it as, now that you are reborn in the way that people in that movement would talk about. So, again, like I said, everybody's welcome on this channel, but that's what I think the lyrics are about. Let me know if you have a different take. But here we go. This is Eat Your Dog by Bad Religion, originally from their 82 album How Could Hell Be Any Worse, but heard here as part of the 91 compilation 8085. I love the sound. Compilation voice news. They're dying and you asshole, you're living on me now. Dying and starving and millions of now. Some of the men guilt. Words of creatures from the hill. What they do and what they need. Say what you want to say. It's a Hindu religion, the mind of a working Joe. Starving the fire and millions of now. The God of the God Jesus Christ. that classic early 80s hardcore punk thing where a lot of the songs are a minute long, minute 10, maybe even like 55 seconds, so it very much fits into that idiom in terms of its structure and sort of composition. Yeah, I enjoy it. It just has that early gritty sound, and I love, as I said, when I discovered that Bad Religion had that sort of heritage too, that, oh, they've actually been around since the early 80s too. Because again, when I got Suffer, I was just trying to, go through this band that I didn't know a whole lot about, and then, oh my god, it's so good. What was their next album? Oh, that was No Control. Oh my god, it's so good. And then eventually it was like, oh, actually, here's their 80-85 material, like, awesome. So, yeah, very much enjoy this sound, even if it's different from the slightly more polished sound that they would eventually develop. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's another one on here I haven't reacted to yet you'd like to hear it. I think I've reacted to maybe like 3 of the songs, and I think there, what is it, like 27? There's a lot of songs on this, 28 even, so yeah. Although there's a couple versions of their sort of title song, or theme song, as I think they called it, Bad Religion. So yeah, maybe we'll pick one of those. I think one was on the album, and then one was on one of their EPs. Either way, let me know what you think, and let me know if there's another tune on here you'd like to hear. Other than that, thank you for listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.